So I'm so excited this morning. I have Dr. Sheree with me. Dr. Sheree and I met when we were 13, almost 14 years old in ninth grade at Ben Franklin High School in New Orleans, Louisiana. And after that, we continued our education together. We attended Tougaloo College in Tougaloo, Mississippi, and then Brown Medical School in Providence, Rhode Island. And then Dr. Sheree, what did you do after Providence?
Well, after medical school, I did my residency at the University of Mississippi Medical Center in Jackson, Mississippi in family medicine. And after graduation from residency, I was in private practice in the Jackson metro area for 7 years. And currently I'm a faculty at the medical center.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. And our paths had continued to cross since the 90s when we met. We did a lot of education and training together, but most importantly to me, we've been friends throughout this time. And it was funny because last month we were on our undergrad's campus. We were walking around. It was our school's, Founders Week and our founder celebration. And people who didn't know us were like, "Are y'all sisters?" And it's like, "Oh, that sounds so familiar."
Well, what's funny is people who do know us still ask us that question.
Yeah. Y'all been around for 30 years. Yeah, so we've been literally asked this for almost 30 years. And I don't have any biological sisters, but I would imagine this is what the relationship would be like. So I greatly appreciate
and same
it.
for me. I have no biological sisters either. So I feel the same. So we are sisters.
We are
high school sisters, college sisters, sorority sisters. Yeah. We're sisters. So
you're my children's tea. We say in New Orleans, we say, not maybe auntie, but like T Sheree, like that's T Sheree. So through and through. And in true fashion, I said, "Sheree, I need your help." So Dr. Sheree, I need your help. And she said, "Well, what do you want to talk about?" I said, "Well, I don't know, but we'll come up with something." And we have. So I'm glad that you all are tuned in. You're in for a treat because we know that November is Diabetes Awareness Month. And then also a lot of us celebrate holidays. And so we have a few holidays coming up. And that can be a time of overindulgence. We're thinking about our favorite meals, our favorite dishes. Some of these things we may only have once a year. And so as I was thinking about, we were discussing what we could present today, I have a question for you, Dr. Sheree. Are you in the camp of, "Oh, it's just one day, eat what you want"? Or are you in the camp of try your best to stick with your diet or your nutrition plan?
I'm definitely in the camp of trying to stick with your diet and nutrition plan. I feel that letting yourself overindulge for one day allows you to feel like you continue to do it. And so a lot of people, including myself, don't have that discipline to say, I'm going to go all in on Thanksgiving or Christmas because, this is a day for eating. But then on Friday or the day after, I'm going to go back. A lot of people don't have that discipline. And so my recommendation would be for people to try to stick to their diet throughout. And I think that's going to be the most successful.
Yeah, I agree. Earlier in my career, I would say, "Oh, your birthday only comes once a year. Oh, Christmas is only once a year." But I have found that especially when, carb addiction is real. Mm-hmm. And so for some people, they could have that taste or they could have that treat on the one day and then put it down. But for others, it can activate a physiological response that can lead to furthering that addiction or reactivate that addiction. So I am leaning more towards stick to what you do the rest of the year.
Right. It's like if you use like alcohol as an example, like, you tell an alcoholic, stay away, they try. And then one day it's their birthday. You say, "Oh, you can, have that little drink for your birthday." And then you never know how that can spin them back into their addiction. So it's the same with carbs and eating addiction. Addiction is addiction, whatever it is, it's still an addiction.
You're correct. And when you were saying that, I was thinking about how I hear this repeatedly. If people choose to go back to the way they used to eat or overindulge, they'll say later, "I didn't even enjoy it. It didn't even feel like it." And then the after effect from maybe they're experiencing guilt afterwards because they relapsed.
Correct.
Or they could be feeling like the heaviness from the food. Their bodies are like, "What is this?" Because they're not used to it. A lot of people end up saying it just wasn't worth it.
Right, exactly. I agree. A lot of people say, "Doc, it really wasn't worth it."
Mm-hmm. Well, this is what experience has taught us, huh? So we've been in
Yes.
practice now for like 15 years. And I'll be the first to admit that my advice to people has evolved as I have evolved as an individual, as I learn more, read and research. Yes, my advice through the years definitely has evolved in many things, including this.
I agree. I have too. And, experience is a great teacher. So,
Oh, yes. Mhm. Okay, so Dr. Sheree, what tips do you have for people as they head to their family meal to help them stick to their plan?
well, one tip I have is that if you're a cook or a chef, which unfortunately I am not, you may want to bring your own meal, something that you know that you can eat, something you prepared yourself, something that you know a low carb, low calorie, high protein. And that way, when you get there, your choice is something you made and you're not really kind of relying on what somebody else prepared. So that's one tip I have. Another tip I have is try not to go starving
Yeah.
so that you won't overeat, so, maybe have like a quick breakfast that morning. I'm very guilty of on holidays, knowing the meals I have in front of me, avoiding breakfast because I want to save room for the dinner. But, you may need to have that breakfast so that you're not going to the dinner really hungry and possibly overeating, and that way you can have a good portioned dinner, and when you leave not feeling that you stuffed yourself than how most of us feel after we have a holiday meal. Another tip I have is drink water before you have your meal. Water makes you feel full, and so if you drink a lot of water before you have your meal, then by the time you have your meal you may not want to eat as much.
Yeah, those are great. And when you were talking about the not waiting until dinner to eat, it reminded me that a lot of people with diabetes may take certain medications that it's not safe for them to skip a meal, or they
Right.
may prefer to take the medication with the meal. So that's even another reason not to wait to dinner and then load up. So that reminds me, a lot of people will, I've done it, will eat the big dinner and then sit down and not do anything else. So one of the tips that I like to give is to go for an after meal stroll. I'm all about walking. So like after meal strolls can be a good opportunity to help process some of the food and burn off some of the carbohydrates.
Exactly. And it also is just really good just to be out and, especially if the weather is great, just to
Right.
get some fresh air if you've been, in the house all day.
Let's see. I like the drink water before eating because I can help you get full. And when you said that, it reminded me too that sometimes, a lot of times, I'll advise people to try to fill half of their plate with green vegetables because
Yes.
getting full off of that can also help cut down on the carbohydrate or the treat intake. And then one of my favorite things is to use a smaller plate. I do this every day. It doesn't
Yes.
have to be a
Yes.
holiday because,
Yes.
visually you can fill your plate, but your volume
Correct.
is less. Because I often encourage people to limit their carbohydrate to what they can fit right here on their
Mhm,
hand, or
mhm.
there's the plate method where they're filling a quarter of the plate with the carbohydrates.
Right.
And just as a quick review, carbohydrates are like potato, pasta, rice, bread, I say corn, grits, vegetables and fruit have carbohydrates, but for this purpose, I'm mainly talking about the ones that I listed out. And so if they're limiting their carbohydrates or using a smaller plate, that can also help guide their food choices.
I totally agree. I think the small plate method is a smart and excellent idea for someone who's really trying to work on their portion control.
Oh yes, it's surprising. Well, like when you hear about those accounts from about how fast food was served in the 60s or the
Mhm.
70s, and how the portions then
Portions. Right.
are like our children's meal portion now.
Mhm.
Over the decades, our portions have just increased. And
And
so,
we were supersized kids, right? They
oh
don't
yeah,
have it
we were
anymore, but when we were growing up, you could supersize
right.
your
It just made
meal.
sense to supersize. It was like an economic decision. It helped to get, yes, yes. And it really distorted our understanding of what was an appropriate portion.
Exactly.
It
And what
really
people need
did.
to Another recommendation I make is that eat slower, let your body process the food that you're eating and see when you get full, because if you're just trying to stuff, your brain doesn't have time to say, hey, I'm full. So eat slowly and let your brain say, okay, I'm full, and just, put the plate away. Some people may feel, oh, I didn't eat so-and-so's, whatever. They're going to think I don't like it. But hey, we're talking about, this is a health decision.
And you may not like it. It could be a reason not to eat it, like, well, I'm full, I'll have to wait to the next meal. Yeah, so let that be like the last thing you eat. But I read accounts that it can take up to 20 minutes for your brain to register you're full. And I will admit, I have been guilty of stuffing, eating quickly, because the days of residency and eating in the hospital, in the wards, like I would literally have like a meal stuffed in my pocket. So, I'm hurrying, eating a bar, eating a banana, and I have to remind myself, like, slow down. This is a different stage of life. This is a different circumstance. I can slow down, enjoy, and really check in to see when I'm full.
Right.
Yeah. When you said that about so-and-so's dish, it could also be an opportunity to have a leftover. We can enjoy that dish later, at the next meal, because realistically, if you're limiting your carbohydrate intake and you're at a traditional, we're from the South, okay? So we're from New Orleans. You now live in Mississippi. I live in Georgia. And it's not that meals are regional, but I mean, if we're thinking about our typical holiday fixings, probably most of the spread is going to be carbohydrates. So correct. You could either take a little spoonful of each dish, or you could say, I'll have this at lunch, I'll have this tomorrow at dinner, or I'll have, so kind of spreading out the intake so that you can enjoy it responsibly.
Right. I think for those who don't get like me, since I don't cook, when I do have a holiday meal, like it's probably food I don't get, maybe once twice a year. So I think I put in like just a little bit, just so you can say you had it and tasted it, but trying to, if you want to sample multiple dishes, you just maybe getting like a little teaspoon or a tablespoon versus getting like a good helping of it would help with the carbs.
I routinely say, I don't like using absolutes, but I can almost always say, I'm going to eat the da-da-da. Like, for instance, if I go to New Orleans, there's a good chance I'm going to eat a beignet. But what I tell myself is, because like you said, some things we don't have often, and we can associate them with the holiday time as part of our enjoyment, as part of our experience, and what we reminisce about and what we really hold on to. I tell people, just because one is good, it does not mean that two are better. Right. So I'll enjoy that one. I'll savor every flavor, every texture. And when it's done, it's done. And so that also helps me balance me enjoying what the holidays may bring, and still kind of sticking to my nutrition plan.
Right. Yeah, I think that's a good idea.
So for many people with diabetes, knowing what their blood sugars are can really help them determine what they can eat, when they can eat it, how much exercise they may benefit from, how much insulin to give themselves if they have that kind of treatment plan. So what advice do you have for people about blood sugar monitoring?
Well, I definitely think, if you're on insulin, it is imperative that you check your blood sugars because of the risk of your sugar dropping too low on insulin. I have a lot of patients on insulin that won't monitor their blood sugars, and I encourage them strongly to try to monitor, because if they need to know if they're too high, especially if they're too low, because that can be quite dangerous. Yeah. So then most people will say, well, Doc, I don't like sticking my finger. I have a patient, she has a 3-year-old granddaughter stick her fingers. And I'm like, okay, we're going to have to come up with a better solution than this.
That's a brave little girl. But that's
okay. And so, now we have monitors where you don't have to stick your finger, like the Freestyle Libre. Not trying to plug it. I have no gain to saying that. They do not pay me anything. Dexcom is another one. And that's a sensor that goes on your arm. And if you have a smartphone, you can see your numbers and your sugars by just putting your phone to the sensor and it connects. And then you can bring that to your doctor and say, hey, these are my sugars were. And it also alerts you if your sugar is too low. Which is really good for those patients who are not vigilant about checking their sugar. The Freestyle Libre would say, hey, your sugar is low. You need to do something about that. So I think those are really good options, especially for patients who do not like sticking their finger, which there is a lot of.
Yeah. No, I agree. That has been a great tool, those continuous glucose monitors, because it's powerful to know in real time what your meal choice an hour ago or 2 hours ago, resulted in. And on the other side too, it's powerful to know what, maybe a 20-minute exercise session, how that could improve your blood sugar. So yes, those monitors are a really good option for people, like you said, who may not want to continuously.
Right. And I think it's like checking your weight every day. When you know what's going on, you may be more conscious to do something about it. So if I know my sugar is in the 200s, I may not have that donut for breakfast. I may say, oh, this is going to raise my sugar even more. So let me not eat that. So I think, making sure that we're keeping our sugars monitored also help us consciously know how we should be eating.
Yeah. I don't mean any harm when I say, but like the saying, ignorance is bliss. And so, if we don't know what our numbers are, and I'm including me, it is, we can make these decisions that will continue to potentially hurt us. But
patients, they may be in a state of denial that, doc, I just don't want to know, but ultimately is not the best health choice for your health, because of course those things have consequences. So having elevated blood sugars for too long a period of time have consequences which we are trying to avoid.
When you just said that, it reminded me that a lot of people have gotten so used to not feeling well that that's their normal, and they don't know that they could feel better with better blood sugars. So yes,
I agree. I often ask patients who are finally, maybe their blood pressure is better or their blood sugar is better. I'm like, or they have lost the amount of weight. And I'll say, how are you feeling? And they're like, oh, doc, I feel great. But they didn't know they could feel that way because they had been living, it's so in the uncontrolled state for so long.
So let's talk more about that, because when people have diabetes, and you also mentioned high blood pressure, because a lot of times, unfortunately, these things can run together. So when people have diabetes in particular, what are some of the things that they need to, what do you make sure your patients do at least once a year or periodically to make sure their organs are healthy and not having long-term damage from the diabetes?
Yeah, so they should definitely be getting their feet checked at least once a year. So they should look at their feet every day, making sure there are no wounds or ulcers or any type of changes to their feet. They need to make sure their feet are moisturized. I mean, diabetes unfortunately makes your skin drier by nature. And then when you shower or take a bath, that can dry your skin out. So I always recommend to my patients, even non-diabetics, when you get out of the tub or the shower, put some, moisturize your skin. And for diabetics, it's very important to do that to their feet because cracked, dry feet increases their risk of having a diabetic foot ulcer, which unfortunately increases your risk of having an amputation. So that's one thing I focus on with my patients. Look at your feet every day. If for whatever reason, because of your body habitus or your disability or ability, and you can't, just put a mirror in front of your bed. And just have, put your foot up and see if you can see your feet that way. Another thing I recommend is that you for sure should be having your eyes checked yearly. The recommendation is to get a dilated eye exam once a year. So I recommend to my patients that even if you don't see an ophthalmologist, which is the medical doctor of the eye, and you see an optometrist, which is those people who correct your lens, they can still dilate the back of your eyes and take a look in the back of them. So make sure that you're getting your eyes dilated. I know a lot of people don't like their eyes dilated because of the sun and driving, but that's very important for diabetics. Another thing that they should be doing every year is making sure their kidneys are being checked. Diabetes has a extremely high risk of end-stage renal disease and dialysis. And so keeping an eye on your kidney function by doing your creatinine, which is letting you know how well your kidneys are filtering, or even checking your protein in your urine, which may give the doctor an idea of whether or not you're starting to develop some type of kidney issue from the diabetes. That is really important to get checked every year as well. And then just don't forget about your regular preventive things. So if you're a woman, make sure you're still getting your mammograms if appropriate. Make sure you're still getting your colonoscopies. That's for everyone. For males, make sure you're getting your, PSAs, your prostate antigen check, which could be a conversation we can have another time, which I would love to have. I'm very a strong proponent of prostate cancer risk management and screening. And then, just immunizations, you should be getting your flu shot. You should already probably have your flu shot for this year. Making sure you're getting your pneumonia vaccine, because if you're diabetic, you qualify for a pneumonia vaccine before the age of 65. Making sure you have your COVID vaccine. So things of that nature. Just sometimes patients get so caught up in going to their follow-up visits for like their diabetes and high blood pressure that they forget about like the preventive annual wellness things. Pap smears for females, making sure that you're up to date on those. So just not neglecting, focusing on that is good and making sure that's under control, but we can't neglect the other things as well.
Well, thank you for that rundown, PCP, Dr. Sheree. We encourage you who are watching to check in with your own PCP if we are not them, and asking to make sure these tests have been done for you, because I always say, what is the saying? Like an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, but it's so right. So we need to make sure that we're doing our screenings routinely, and that we're also looking for the signs that diabetes may be doing damage to the organs. So
because they say the research shows that once you're diagnosed with type 2 diabetes, you already have had some evidence of organ damage before you were diagnosed. So it's very important that we try to catch those in the early stage as possible.
So when you said that, it reminded me of the statistic, and I think it's like, what percentage of people don't even know they have prediabetes?
I don't know what percentage don't know, but I know 1/3 of the US have prediabetes.
Okay. So 1/3, so thank you for that. 1/3 of the US has prediabetes. And I remember reading at some point, there's a large percentage of people who don't even know that they have prediabetes. And so to Dr. Sheree's point, by the time people may even present with type 2, damage may have been done for years. So yes, this is also a good reminder for just everybody to go for their annual screenings, or if something doesn't feel right, go get it checked out. If you have a family history, go get it checked out. If you're working to achieve a healthy weight, go get your blood sugar checked, because there are certain risk factors that we know that we can get screened earlier and hopefully work on preventing progression to diabetes, or at least mitigating the potential risks that may happen.
And Dr. Akita, we are practicing in a good time right now, because we have all these new drugs that have come out that we can start treating with early to help with like diabetes and obesity, diabetes and kidney problems. I mean, back when we were in residence, we didn't have these options. So we're not going to say how long ago that was, but
I always tell my students back when I was a resident, but I mean, yeah,
but we didn't have all those options. We're very limited in how we treated prediabetes or diabetes. But today, because of new drugs that have come out in the market, we do have these options to, if you are overweight and maybe even pre-diabetic, possibly start on something to help with the weight loss, which then may help you not become diabetic. So I encourage my patients that once they get the diagnosis of prediabetes, which is very common, try not to get discouraged, because there are things we can do to prevent you from being diabetic.
Yeah, I'm usually very inclined to push lifestyle. A lot of people come to me because they want natural solutions or they want lifestyle medicine. But I do know that there's a certain sector of the population where we have to I tell people, however you get to goal, whether it's a medication, weight loss, however you get to goal for the, the disease, whether it's diabetes, high blood pressure, it's fine with it, just get to goal. And so for a lot of people that, they may need the medication, and it's not to say that they failed at something or something else that didn't work, but we have to get to goal. I tell people, when my great grandparents were living, my on my maternal side, they had diabetes. They didn't have a lot of resources. They went through limb amputations, plural. They went through blindness. These are complications that nowadays don't have to even happen. And I still see it, but we have so many options. As Dr. Sheree said, there's been a lot of progress in the treatment of diabetes, even in the last 15 or so years.
Yeah, a lot of progress. And I tell patients, if I put them on something to help them, I tell them this doesn't have to be permanent all the time, but it might just be the little push that you need to get to goal, as you stated, and then work on your lifestyle change or continue your lifestyle change and lifestyle management. Unfortunately, my patient population, I don't really get a lot of, I have strong desire for lifestyle change, but it's just it's very hard for some of my patients to get to that. So I give them a little, push to help them get there. And so far I've had good results because the side effects are low of the medicine. So of course you want the benefits to outweigh the risk. So
yeah, I think generally speaking, we underestimate what it takes to change lifestyle.
Yeah.
That's another conversation for another time. Like, especially I remember first coming out of training, having this idealistic view of the world, but with public health training and just with practice, you just see that things aren't necessarily, anyway, that's another conversation for another time. So I'm glad we're plugging these things for next time because we'll be able to know where we're going.